Hello everyone, and welcome back to another lesson on the history of the Monster Hunter series. This is part 5 in the series and the penultimate episode on the history of the mainline generations. Today we'll be focusing on Monster Hunter World, the most successful game to be released in the series as well as Capcom's best-selling game of all time. If you've seen my previous video discussing whether or not World is a good Monster Hunter game, you'll know I have quite a few criticisms for how the series has progressed in design after its jump from Gen 4 to Generation 5. But that's not what we're here for today. No, instead we'll be continuing to take a look at the development and design history of the games and how the development team managed to make one of the most successful games in Capcom's history. And I really want to celebrate what they have achieved with this release. Monster Hunter World is leaps and bounds the most polished, cinematic, and graphical experience in any release within the series. And it does well in making the player feel incredible, with its eccentric and flashy combat. The amount of work that had to go into designing these locations, new monsters, and updated visuals for existing monsters is absolutely absurd, and you can see that it paid off. So sit back, relax, and get ready to hear about one of the most unique entries within Monster Hunter. If you haven't watched my previous videos on the history of the series, I suggest you do so now. Additionally, if you enjoy these videos and want to help support the channel, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It just takes a couple of seconds and really helps boost the reach of the video to Monster Hunter fans everywhere. What led Monster Hunter to become the Capcom powerhouse it is today, and how did the series perform since its initial inception and release in 2004? In this multi-part video series, we'll take a look at all 5 generations of the Monster Hunter franchise, as well as Frontier, Monster Hunter Online, and several other spin-off games that have been developed. I'm Super Rad, and today I'm here to bring you a brief history of Monster Hunter World. Development for Monster Hunter World began 3 years before its reveal at E3 2017. Thanks to the advancement in console technology and the growing support for the series worldwide, Capcom decided to change the direction of the series and create something they envisioned would have even more of a global appeal, including ease of access, hence why it is the first in the series to be globally released and released on multiple consoles, including PC. Ryozo Tsujimoto, the game's senior producer, and someone I have mentioned multiple times in the past, was growing weary of the arcane rules established by the old series, and felt the way zones were designed were overly limiting but ultimately necessary due to the hardware they were working with. Now planning for a worldwide console release, Tsujimoto and the Monster Hunter team could work on greater, more open and naturally feeling environments, with ecosystems that both players and monsters would interact with. However, this change to the environments caused a design shift that was felt throughout the entire game, and would cause a change in multiple core elements found in the series previously, such as heightening player mobility when using items, as they couldn't use the standard tactic of leaving the zone for safety. Since these environments were so advanced and monsters were to interact with them, a lot of work designing monsters had to go hand in hand with level design. Typically, designers would come up with a mechanic to feature the monster around and then work with level designers to make sure it could be properly implemented. This made it harder to have monsters appear in more than one area, as they were generally designed around the complexities of the area you initially found them in. This design shift led to one very apparent observation: Western players were going to love this game. An open world console and PC experience pretty much checked off all the necessary boxes for what makes for a strong base when it comes to the Western market. And console games were much more popular globally than portable games, which were only exceptionally strong in Japan. The stars were aligning for Capcom, and this led to the decision of a global release. There were other aspects changed for Western audiences as well, such as fully voice-acted content and adjustments to the user interface with a cleaner and overall design, and addition of a radial menu for easy item selection. Apparently they wanted these cutscenes to help cut down on the unskippable dialogue boxes of past games, which is funny because they didn't make cutscenes skippable at all unless they were repeatable scenes from specific assignments, and there were still plenty of unskippable dialogue. There's actually a prototype of an early iteration of the game that demonstrated a turf war between an Anjanath and a LAKEY cruise, which is especially interesting considering that there are no Leviathans within Monster Hunter World or Iceborne. During a post-mortem for Monster Hunter World, game director Yuya Tokuda explained that LAKEY cruise was originally added in the prototype but was ultimately scrapped. Apparently, there were too many issues with the animation rig for Leviathans, and the bones of the species were removed. Poogie also wasn't planned for the initial release of the game, but fan outcry led to the beloved pet being implemented through a day one patch. Now, Poogie has many costumes to unlock within world and appears in both the base game and Iceborne expansion. Developers continued the tradition set from Monster Hunter 4 and Generations by adding a large amount of tutorial content to help make the game more accessible to newer players. There was even a training area introduced where players could easily test out any weapons of their choosing. The title, Monster Hunter World, is used to complement the interconnectedness of this entry, with a worldwide release, global servers, and an open world experience in each area. Let's take a look at some of the additional changes and main features in this entry. The most apparent change or upgrade is the graphical and cinematic improvements introduced. Now running on next-gen hardware and made specifically as a next-gen experience, the engine had the ability to use high-quality models and textures, as well as breathing life into areas with dense foliage and details not possible in previous releases. Monsters specifically received a huge upgrade, with a lot of older monsters getting revamped designs to better show off their fur, feathers, scales, and other additional features. They began to feel more drenched in realism than their older generation predecessors. Monsters and areas weren't the only aspects of the game to receive graphical improvements, however. Both hunters and palicos featured a high level of detail, and players could now fully customize the face of their character, choosing various styles for multiple face features, hairstyles, expressions, and more. World provided the most customizable experience for creating a hunter since the series release. Palico customization also offered a large amount of options, but were generally very similar to their old gen counterpart, just with some next gen polish introduced. Along with improved graphical content came updated player controls, movement, and fidelity. World wanted to focus on players being in the action and helped promote that by making it easier for the players to run around and interact with the map. Hunters were now faster and more agile, with the ability to turn on a dime. They could chase after monsters easier and even had the ability to slide down large sloping areas for extra speed, and the ability to jump off of these sloping areas while sliding to perform various aerial attacks. Similar to Monster Hunter 4 and Generations, the design of maps featured many ledges for the player to climb up and jump from. A lot of the areas were designed to reward the player for traversing them properly. Finding areas they could slide or vines that they could swing on would often offer faster pathways to their destination than simply running. Additionally, there were plenty of Slinger bugs placed around each area, allowing hunters to grapple onto them and swing around with ease. The Slinger could even be shot when climbing up large cliff sides, to allow the player to climb much faster than what was traditionally expected. Now, before we talk further on the areas themselves or the Slinger, let's discuss the storyline and progression introduced. Monster Hunter World introduces the player to a brand new area called the New World, a location where elder dragons are known to migrate every 10 years, known as the Elder Dragon Crossing. The player hunter is part of an ocean-bound fleet that has been sent to assist the Research Commission on finding out more about the surrounding area and monsters that roam within it. The player and their recently introduced handler arrive in Astera, which is a base of operations set up to help the Commission while being safe from monster attacks. Astera functions like most hunting villages found in past releases. Here, players can accept quests, eat, forge weapons and armor, and explore their player quarters. World does something similar to older releases where the player's living quarters are upgraded as they progress through the game. Caught endemic creatures can also be displayed here. The Argosy system is reintroduced and the player can send them off for themed sets of items that cost research points to buy once the Argosy captain returns. Additionally, the player gets harvest boxes that they can use to grow various gathering items. Another major addition is the melding pot, where players can turn in items worth varying amounts of points to create other items they may not have the traditional gathering materials for. Through getting rare permits, the player can even meld some rare drops off of monsters like plates or rubies, or even make some low-level decorations. The game first focuses on the hunter and multiple fleets dealing with the new large elder dragon introduced to world known as Zora Magdaros. Monsters are known to migrate to a specific location in the new world known as the Rotten Vale when they are ready to die, but Zora Magdaros is instead on its way to a place known as the Everstream, which is a large underground system of tunnels and rivers. Bioenergy is introduced in world, and if Zora Magdaros dies there, the bioenergy it releases could destroy the entirety of the new world. Through their endeavors to explore more about Zora Magdaros, the player explores the various areas of the new world, as well as visiting the airship research base controlled by the Third Fleet. Nergigante, the flagship monster of world, is an elder dragon known for preying on other elder dragons, with Zora Magdaros being next on the menu. When the fleet works on their initial capture attempt of Zora Magdaros, Nergigante shows up to protect its new prey, and shows up again a second time, during the fleet's second and final attempt where they finally manage to drive Zora Magdaros into the ocean where it dies. The death and release of its bioenergy creates a new aquatic ecosystem around the new world. With Zora Magdaros out of the way, Nergigante travels to the Elder's Recess, a location Elder Dragons flock to, and hunts many of the Elder Dragons there, driving them away to the surrounding areas that the player has already visited. The player is forced to research and hunt many of these Elder Dragons before finally hunting and slaying Nergigante. The large amount of energy within the Elder's Recess is traced back to an incubating Elder Dragon that is feeding off of the bioenergy and eventually hatches into a powerful infant beast known as Xeno'jiiva. The player hunter successfully hunts Xeno'jiiva and ultimately completes the main objective of the expedition. However, many of the expeditioners decide to stay in the New World for further research. There are multiple new locations for the player to explore within the New World. Most of these areas include more than one campsite. Generally, 1 or 2 of these campsites are unlocked automatically, but multiple others can be unlocked by completing various tasks or deliveries once the site for the camp is found. These areas can also be freely fast traveled to as long as the player doesn't have anything aggro to them at the time. Additionally, the player has full access to their item box within these camps, meaning all stored items can be picked up here and the player can change equipment during a hunt whenever they want. There is even a little canteen at each camp allowing the player to eat if they forgot to before heading out on a mission, or if the effects of the last meal have worn off and the hunter has become hungry again. New areas include Ancient Forest, the first area introduced in Monster Hunter World where the player will spend most of their early time. It consists of multiple sub-areas including a shoreline which is much more open and spacious, a lower forest area which is more dense and packed with aggressive creatures, and an upper forest area surrounding the ancient tree. Near the top of the map is a flying wyvern nest. Wildspire Waste, a new desert location. It's also broken up into multiple sub-locations with a muddy swamp area, small forest area, and traditional desert area. Underneath the waste is a tunnel system that the players can traverse. Coral Highlands, a very unique location unlike anything we have seen in a Monster Hunter game. All of the foliage is based off of coral found underwater, and the area consists of 2 subsections, the lower section where many grounded monsters roam, and the highlands which can reach up to the clouds. Rotten Vale, another unique area introduced to the series where many monsters, including Elder Dragons, come to die. It's inhospitable to most creatures, and hunters will often take damage from some of the deeper areas. It is situated under the Coral Highlands, but is thought to be how the Highlands came to be in the first place. It consists of 3 subsections, the upper sections which are fairly open, the lower sections which are full of poisonous gas known as effluvium, and the deepest depths full of acidic pools. Multiple monsters in this area have the ability of inflicting the effluvium status ailment where a hunter's maximum health bar will be lowered significantly. Elder's Recess is the last big hunting area the player will be introduced to and generally acts as this entry's volcanic zone. The upper and middle sub-areas consist of crystallized structures created through the bioenergy of Elder Dragons, while further down is a large volcanic area. At the very deepest section of the volcanic zone is an arena-like area that generally hosts creatures like Teostra or Lunastra. Next up are some special locations for unique assignments within the game. First is the Great Ravine, an area that has been reinforced with plenty of special weaponry by the fleets to hunt Zora Magdaros. The player transitions between fighting on top of Zora and running around the weaponry to damage it from a distance. The end of the Great Ravine leads to the Coral Highlands. Next is the Everstream, where the hunter will have their final encounter with Zora Magdaros. The fight functions very similarly to the initial one, but with the goal of driving the Elder Dragon into the ocean. A path created by Zora leads to the Elder's Recess. Confluence of Fates is the final area introduced in the base game before any updates, and is an arena-like location covered in bioenergy crystals. This location is broken up into 2 separate arena areas and where the player will hunt and slay Xeno'jiiva. The release of the Kulve Taroth Siege event brought with it a new unique location known as the Caverns of El Dorado. Here, players will fight and chase Kulve Taroth through multiple zones that lead deeper into the cavern, until they either break the horns off of it or it runs away. How players tracked these monsters had to be updated to work with the map's design. Instead of using paintballs, players could now find monster tracks, which would help their new tool, the Scoutflies, in tracking the monster. Scoutflies create a trail throughout the map that the player can follow to more tracks or to the monster itself. Additionally, if the player sights the monster, it'll be available on the map for the rest of the quest, and won't require more tracks to find if the player loses sight of it. On to weapons and armor. Both armor and armor skills have been reworked. Gone is the points and skill system of past games where players required a certain amount of points and a skill to activate it, and further point requirements to upgrade it. Instead, each skill has a specific amount of levels, and just 1 point of a skill will provide a level and some sort of benefit to the player. They can wear multiple armor pieces or slot in decorations to increase the effect. Some pieces and decorations offer more than one level of bonus, allowing players to easily mix and match sets. No longer are there Blade Master and Gunner options, now all armor is universal, and what really differentiates them is the skills they come equipped with. There have been changes in decorations and charms in comparison to the older games. In previous entries, charms were randomly generated items with randomly generated skill bonuses, but the player only needed to equip one of them and could craft the decorations for their empty slots to better fine-tune their armor set. Now it's the opposite. Decorations are randomly generated while the player can craft charms. Due to the amount of grinding involved in decorations, armor sets were reworked slightly to help players who didn't want to grind through RNG. Armor slots have been changed as well. In previous games, each slot would be equal and the level of decoration would determine how many slots it took up. Now each slot has a specific level which dictates the maximum level of decoration that can be equipped to it. A monster's armor set now comes in alpha and beta versions. These different versions have multiple visual differences, but the biggest difference is how skills work on them. Alpha sets offer more built-in skills from the get-go, with either less decoration slots or slots of lower levels. If the player is looking for more customization, they could work towards the beta set instead, which will either completely remove a built-in skill or lower the amount of levels of the skill installed. To make up for this, the set will either have decoration slots of higher levels or more slots in general. Players can get through most of, if not all, content using alpha sets, but to be the most effective, beta sets are usually preferred. Taking a page from Generations Ultimate, World also introduced layered armor sets, which function like armor fusion and allow the players to put specifically designed layered sets of armor over what they are currently wearing. This was originally a very limited feature, with few armor sets available and didn't allow the layering of crafted sets, but instead special sets that the player received through events, new quests, deliveries, or the deluxe edition release. Weapons also received various changes within World, the biggest being their designs. World's focus on melding all of the designs together is very apparent, with a lot of bone weaponry and branching trees for it looking incredibly similar with few visual differences as you upgrade them. A late game Anjanath weapon can look almost identical to any other late game bone weapons. This isn't the case for every weapon in their respective trees, however, and some come off looking truly unique. Speaking of weapon trees, the player now has the ability to see all paths for all weapons at any time by talking to the smithy, which better helps them plan out how they are going to upgrade their various weapons. All weapons have also been reworked to include new abilities built in similar to hunting arts from Generations Ultimate. For example, the longsword now has a move that allows them to evade monster attacks. After a successful evasion, they can follow up with a counter that will automatically level up their spirit gauge if it connects. Extreme Forging makes its return in the form of weapon augmentations. By hunting tempered elder dragons, players had the opportunity to obtain special streamstones. Players would need to obtain these special streamstones specific to their weapon so that, when fully upgraded, they could apply an augmentation to it. The weapon being augmented would have varying amounts of augmentation slots, and each augment would take up one of them. The possible augments at this point were attack, defense, or affinity boosts, an augment that upgrades the slot on the weapon, or a health regen effect that will heal the player as they land attacks. Armor pieces also had the ability to be augmented, which would unlock the ability to level it up further for higher defense. Monster Hunter World has one of the smaller monster counts in the series. After all the updates and the Iceborne expansion, they still only reach 31 large monsters and 17 small monsters, a far cry from games of the past. This was almost certainly due to the limitations introduced through creating a next-gen experience and the work required for that. Still, it boasts 18 large monsters before any updates. Let's take a look at what was introduced. Great Jagras, new to the series and one of the first monsters the player hunter will encounter in the new world. They are fanged wyverns and have the ability to swallow large creatures by expanding their body. Kuluyaku, a small bird wyvern similar to a dodo. They can carry boulders and eggs that they are usually stealing from a nest. The rock can be used both defensively to block attacks or offensively to stun hunters. Tsitsiyaku, another bird wyvern similar to a raptor. It has fins on either side of its head which can expand. The fins have the ability to reflect light and allows the monster to create a blinding effect that can stun hunters and monsters alike. Puke, a unique chameleon-like bird wyvern, slightly similar in design to chameleons, though much less threatening. It has the ability to poison the player and can enhance the abilities of its poison by eating specific nuts. Paolumu, a flying wyvern that resembles a bat. Its neck has a special air sac that can be inflated, allowing it to float in the air while using its tail to attack. Tobikadachi, a squirrel-like fanged wyvern that has the ability to use electricity. It can jump around the surrounding trees of the ancient forest to attack its prey. When electrified, the fur on its back will stand up. Anjanath, an incredibly aggressive brute wyvern that resembles a T-Rex. I said the same thing about Glavenus, but apparently that was wrong. It has the ability to unfold a large nasal crest on its head, which it can use to spread mucus and mark its territory. Giratotus, a Piscine wyvern which hasn't had a new large monster introduction since the release of Lavasioth. Similar to Barroth, it has the ability to cover and protect itself in mud. It will spread mud throughout the area during the fight, and the player can use these to run through the swampy areas with ease. Great Gyros, a pack leader found in the Rotten Vale and fanged wyvern that resembles a cobra. Its fangs have the ability to paralyze players and will generally have its pack help harass its prey. It can also spit paralyzing fluid. Legiana, an ice-based flying wyvern that thrives in the Coral Highlands. It has a pair of antennae on its head and it is incredibly fast. It has the ability to create incredibly cold winds to attack its prey with. Odogaron, a grotesque flesh-like fanged wyvern that acts as an apex predator within the Rotten Vale. It has the ability to inflict bleed status and is highly aggressive. Hunters will often find it carrying some sort of prey between its strong jaws. Radobon, a brute wyvern found in the Rotten Vale, covered in bones that it uses as armor. It is incredibly similar to an Uragon, along with its strong jaw typically seen on their species, and can also roll around the map like a wheel. Dodogama, a fanged wyvern similar in appearance to a great jagras. It primarily exists within the Elder's Recess, and its main diet consists of rocks. It can make these rocks explode and use them to attack aggressors. Basilgeuse, a flying wyvern who functions similarly to Deviljho when it was first introduced. It's an incredibly powerful and aggressive monster that will show up to ruin the day of a hunter while they are out trying to slay something else. Since the update that introduced Deviljho to the New World, Basilgeuse can be seen in conflict with them regularly. Finally, we have all the Elder Dragons introduced in Monster Hunter World. Zora Magdaros, an incredibly large monster and the main focus of the game's storyline until the hunting fleet manages to send it off into the ocean. It's so large that hunters can scale it and fight on top of it, and stores an incredible amount of bioenergy. Nergigante, the flagship monster and Elder Dragon hunter of Monster Hunter World. It actively preys on multiple Elder Dragons to feed off of them and their energy. It's incredibly aggressive and covered in quills which it can fire off at will. Valhazak, a unique Elder Dragon found in the Rotten Vale, a grotesque beast that has the ability to cover itself in effluvium, making it incredibly dangerous. It has a very prominent double jaw producing the image of a monster that is falling apart at the seams. Xeno'jiiva, the endgame hunt of the Monster Hunter World questline. It is a creature that has incubated for a long period, consuming large amounts of bioenergy, leading to its glowing blue and translucent appearance. It can use its attacks to heat up the area around it and even collapse into the ground to create large energy bursts. All of these monsters were featured in the game's base release, but to improve the longevity of the series, Capcom began introducing various events and title updates to introduce additional content. Some of these updates brought returning monsters and new monsters entirely. Behemoth from Final Fantasy XIV was introduced in an event quest chain. It holds the Elder Dragon classification and has multiple little mechanics to help emulate the MMO experience. It also has the ability to cast its signature Ecliptic Meteor, and players must hide behind comets to protect themselves from damage. Leshen and Ancient Leshen were introduced in a special Witcher 3 quest chain, in which Geralt of Rivia appears in the New World. They have unique mechanics requiring Geralt or the Hunter to use Witcher signs or rune stones to burn away branches created by the Leshen and open it up for attack. Finally, Kulve Taroth was introduced alongside the Siege mechanic, a large Elder Dragon that covers itself in heavy molten gold. It is rather slow until it's released from its golden encasement, where it becomes more agile and aggressive. Many of the monsters mentioned can be fought with tempered status, usually through the new Investigations mechanic. These monsters are more powerful and enter their enraged state or powered states faster than normal. On top of this, their attack status multiplied to make them much more powerful. They're also resistant to items like flash pods. Players can tell they are going to hunt a tempered monster by the purple outline around their icon. There is also a special arc-tempered state that is only available on some Elder Dragons and is limited to special event quests. For arc-tempered, monster icons have an orange outline around them. Sieges are special quests designed around more than 4 hunters cooperating together to take down large monsters like Kulve Taroth. In these special quests, multiple groups of hunters will go out to hunt a monster, and while there is still a maximum group size of 4, all groups contribute to weakening it. These monsters can be theoretically defeated in a single run, and will offer bonuses if this happens. However, they are designed to be repelled and fought again when weaker. Kulve Taroth specifically brought back the mechanic of randomized weapons. When players completed a siege, they were rewarded with items that would transform into a random weapon with randomized stats. Generally, a lot of these weapons would be extremely effective. All monsters now have research levels. Most of the early monsters introduced have 6 total levels through low rank and high rank, while monsters introduced in high rank start and end with only 4. These levels are raised by hunting monsters, collecting tracks, and breaking parts. Increasing these levels have various effects, but the most important is that they allow Scoutflies tries to find monsters easier. Early levels will help guide the player to their first set of tracks, while later levels will point the player to the monster directly. Normal quests have also been reworked. To help promote World's global multiplayer aspect, all quests are found within the hub of Astera and can either be done through single player or multiplayer. If a quest is tackled with multiple people, the monster will have additional HP, as well as higher status and park break thresholds. Players experiencing difficulties with a quest can fire off an SOS flare, which will allow other hunters to join in a quest even if it's already in progress. Doing so updates the monster's stats to its multiplayer equivalents. Additionally, the Gathering Hub marks its return in Astera, and players within the same server instance can meet up there and interact. Two new features introduced in World are Bounties and Investigations. Bounties are subquests that the player can pick up to complete over various assignments, such as gathering a certain amount of mushrooms or completing a mission in the Ancient Forest twice. By completing these, the players gain various rewards, usually as permits, armor spheres, and research points. Investigations are special optional quests that the player can unlock by researching and defeating monsters. Through breaking monster parts or collecting monster tracks, investigations will unlock. These are randomly generated assignments that usually have some sort of condition, such as maximum of 2 hunters or a shorter period of time allowed to complete the hunt. Depending on the established difficulty of the investigation, it will offer a certain amount and quality of bonus drops from the monster. These quests have a limit on how many times they can be completed before disappearing. The hunter now has access to multiple new objects to help them in slaying monsters. These include slingers, mantles, and tools. The slinger is always equipped to the hunter and is what allows them to climb faster and grapple or swing around the map. This increases the player's aerial mobility and can even use it to grapple back onto a monster if launched off while mounting. Various small items like rocks or nuts can be picked up and equipped into the slinger, allowing the player to shoot them at monsters. Additionally, items like flash bombs have been updated to pods that can be equipped and shot by the player. Multiple mantles exist within the game and each has its own unique effect. By equipping a mantle, the hunter gains the effects for a temporary period of time, which is shortened through the mantle's use. The ghillie mantle, for example, allows the player to hide from monster attention in plain sight, but will automatically wear off if they attack or take damage. Another example would be the temporal mantle, which allows the player to automatically evade when attacked. Players can now equip various tools to bring them on a mission as well, like health boosters, which can be placed on the map, allowing the player to heal over time while standing near it. These items have a cooldown period like mantles, but never run out like potions, meaning players can use them infinitely. Multiple changes were made to other items from previous entries in the series. Since players couldn't switch zones for a brief interval of safety, potions and other consumables were now made safer. Now potions gradually heal the player as they drink them, and hunters have the ability to walk around while consuming. Gathering items like pickaxes and bug nets were now infinite, and whetstones received the same update. Changes to mounting were also implemented. Players can still mount monsters by using aerial attacks to build up towards the monster's mounting threshold. Once mounted, the player will need to mash the attack button to deal damage to whichever part of the monster they are currently attached to. The old mechanic of being chased by the chomping dragon icon no longer exists. Now monsters may try to knock you off by slamming into walls, rocks, or various other objects, and the hunter can jump around to different parts of the monster to dodge this. The monsters will still thrash around and roar, requiring the player to hold on tightly and stop attacking. If the player runs out of stamina, they will fall off. Once the player has dealt enough damage with their hunting knife, they may receive the ability to perform a special attack that will deal high damage before toppling the monster. New Lynian creatures like the Grimalkine and Gajalaka made their appearance as well and had a more active role in the development of the player's Palico. Now the player could find Grimalkine homes and earn their trust. Doing so would unlock one of the multiple tools for the Palico to use in battle. Additionally, these creatures would sometimes help the hunter in battle by trapping the monster or causing multiple status effects. I talk more in depth about all Lynian creatures in one of my previous videos, so be sure to check it out. Another brand new update to the series is Endemic Life. In past games, players could catch bugs and fish through the use of nets or bait, and this returns in World. This new game takes things a step further and introduces the capture net, which can be shot by the Slinger to catch a large amount of various small creatures around each area. There are generally small subquests associated with finding the rarer creatures, and the player can earn research points by collecting them and also display them within their player home. Palicos also received a fair bit of updates. In previous games, the players would collect felines for various tasks and could train them and teach them skills to use in battle. Now the player is meant to focus solely on their personal Palico, through character customization, armor foraging, and the unlocking of various tools. The Palico is meant to feel more like a sidekick and partner in this entry. Players can still hire Palicos they meet through other hunters or on quests to go out on Tail Raider safaris, where they'll collect various items from the locations within the new world. I don't think it'd be controversial to say that it's a fact Monster Hunter World is by far the most popular entry in the series. Not one other entry even comes close to the amount of success World has seen through the global market. Not only has it managed to be the best-selling Monster Hunter game ever created, but it is also the best-selling Capcom game of all time, selling over 15.7 million copies. The game also received universal praise on all consoles and for the PC release. It changed the culture of Monster Hunter and opened it up to a plethora of new players. Now almost anyone familiar with video games knows of Monster Hunter, and through their efforts to make the game more accessible, it's much easier for novice hunters to get started and experience the series for the first time. This generation of Monster Hunter is where my series of videos on its history are starting to reach their climax. After this, and my video about Iceborne, I'll be focusing more on specific aspects of Monster Hunter as well as other games that interest me. Videos on Frontier and Online will also be on the way, but will require a lot more time and work in comparison to the past entries. I also want to check out some of the side and non-mainline games like Monster Hunter Stories. In my previous video about World, I heavily criticized its design philosophies, and I do still feel like there's some sort of charm that's lost through the direction that the series is taking. But does that matter? Well, I don't know. The series is reaching so many people now, and while it's a little bittersweet for me, I'll always be happy to know more people are experiencing Monster Hunter. I met a lot of really amazing people through this series, and I'm happy to know that there are others getting the opportunity to do the same thing. These games are such a gratifying experience, and we're so lucky to live in a time when we can play them. So thanks for sticking with me through this series as far as you have, and if you're new to my videos, thanks for watching, and I hope you check out the previous entries. These are long videos and require a lot of research. If for some reason there's an error, feel free to comment below and let me know. I always try to add corrections when I can. In the next part of the series, we'll be talking about Monster Hunter World's expansion, Iceborne. If you enjoyed this video and you found it informative, consider supporting the channel by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Again, it only takes a couple of seconds and helps support me in my goal of creating this content for you all. I try to respond to every comment I can, so if you want to hear from me, be sure to let me know. Additionally, I now have a Discord server, and you can find the link below. I made some channels specifically for Monster Hunter, so it'd be great to go out on some hunts with you all, or discuss the series in general. Be sure to stop by if you want to hear from me or offer suggestions. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you in the next video.